Joining us now with their reaction to this story and more is this evening's political panel. Roger Fisk is with us, former aide to President Obama and Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Maura Gillespie, founder and principal of BlueStack Strategies. Welcome to you both. Roger, as we just heard the president suggest, he thinks Harvard ultimately will want to make a deal. Harvard has proven to be the higher educational institution that has been least willing to acquiesce to the desires of this administration. Who's ultimately going to blink first as they continue to just ramp up this fight against each other?
Well, first off, Kaylee and Joe, thank you for having me. Wonderful to be here with Maura. To jump ahead, there will be a day when there is no President Trump, and I guarantee you there will be a Harvard. But between now and then, this is just a cornucopia of cultural warfare, red meat for the president's base. You can picture how people interpret this and kind of make a correlation between this and how he's going after some of the trade issues and how he's going after some of the resourcing of jobs. And it all just kind of gets lumped into this larger kind of fighter brand that he has. Clearly, it's very personal. Maybe it's about his own applications years ago, or maybe it's about his son or something like that. I don't know. But it's producing tremendous political value for him, but only with his base, which very often is kind of his North Star in most things.
That's right. Maura, I wonder if you can weigh in on this, because this is clearly, to Roger's point, good politics for President Trump. Is it also good politics for Harvard to keep pushing back and we never see a deal?
Well, I agree with Roger. That Trump will not be here in a few years. He obviously can't run again. Hopefully he doesn't try something. But I think that the bigger picture here is that this has been a rough week in terms of the Trump administration's standing with MAGA. You saw the Epstein fallout with the list and Pam Bondi and all that, and they're trying to find some wins here. And that's what I think this is. Between that and, saying they're going after Brennan and Comey, they're trying to remind MAGA that they are fighting what they believe to be wokeism and corruption and all these things. So they say that they're still fighting them. They say that they still want answers and transparency and all these things. And that's what this is. It's a Trump fighting what he finds to be, an injustice against him because they didn't bow to him. And unfortunately, I don't see how that's helping us find jobs. I don't see how that's helping us lower grocery costs. And so this is personal.
Well, and he's fighting fights not just domestically, but abroad as well. If we look at the most recent tariff letter that was issued, it's for Brazil. A 50% tariff is what's threatened on August 1st. And Maura, he leads the letter by talking about the treatment of the former President Bolsonaro and the insidious attacks in Brazil on free elections and free speech, suggesting that trade policy is somehow going to be leverage for better treatment of this one individual. Is that really how tariffs should be working?
Again, this is the problem with the president going out with these personal vendettas, is because it takes away from what the initial messaging goal here was. He said that he wanted trade policy to be more fair and that the U.S. was being taken advantage of. That worked well for large portions of the Republican Party, but also the American electorate at large. Nobody likes to be feeling like they're being taken advantage of. So that part of the messaging and the reason why he was so obsessed about tariffs, that all made sense until he went about it the way that he did. This example with Brazil, that just shows us that this isn't about finding jobs, trying to make sure that the middle of America, blue-collar workers have those opportunities and have those jobs to bring manufacturing home, which are all important goals. But this tells us just blatantly that the goal is to get back at the people of Brazil. My other concern with the tariff letters, as somebody who wrote correspondence for the Speaker of the House at one point in time, is the letters themselves. This is not professional. This is just truly, they're pretty egregious. And if I had my red pen out, I'd have a lot of work to do on these letters.
Yeah, well, we've got a stack of them here. A lot of them went out today. And interesting, they're all dated July 9th, which was supposed to be the deadline. If we remember correctly, the president, though, says we don't remember correctly. In his cabinet meeting yesterday, he talked about the confusion around what is now an August 1st tariff deadline. Listen.
It's always been August 1st. That's when we're paying. And a statement was put out today, and I put it out just to make it clear. It wasn't a change. It was August 1st. We don't change very much. Every time we put out a statement, they say he made a change. I didn't make a change. Clarification, maybe. No, August 1st they pay.
Hey, Roger, we could play the tape when he said it was 90 days. It, of course, ended July 9th. So you're going to believe him or your lion calendar?
Just wait another day. I think by my count, this is the 57th change to tariffs, either in the amount or the date or anything else. But to connect the dots here, it's important to remember on the Harvard situation that it was a letter that went out, and then they said it wasn't supposed to go out, and all this stuff. So there's just this kind of bureaucratic shrapnel flying all over the place, which is, to Maura's point, just more a statement about professionalism and competence than anything else. The threshold for getting out a letter with the president's signature on it should be extremely high. And then in addition to that, in it or in his comments about it, he said a president should not be threatening people on social media, which I just had to think, well, pot, meat, kettle, because, because of obviously the president's personal appetite for vigorous discourse, shall we say, on social media. So the whole thing, I don't think, meets the bar of anything professional, and it feels very impulsive and very random.
Well, and the president also suggests that these letters in and of themselves, Roger, are deals. This from the president who prides himself on being a deal maker. This isn't usually how we'd see him categorizing a deal.
He has a tendency, and I've said this before and I have no problem saying it, he's very good at the optics and the spectacle, but he actually thinks that that's policy. So when he stepped over the 38th parallel into North Korea, he thinks that that was the deal with Kim Jong-un. And you can see this go on. And so if he just announces something as a deal, then he thinks that somehow that the bureaucratic kind of diplomatic elements of it just kind of get worked out. And so the substance of it, all these trade deals, it's not necessarily about percentage of this or percentage of that. It's about verification. It's about remedy. It's about enforcement. All these things that take years to really get very granular down to the 0.001% of something to hammer out. That's what takes the time. The 6%, the 8%, the 12%, that's kind of ballpark stuff that they all agree on before they sit down. It's how do you actually implement and monitor the implementation of the trade agreement? And that's, I think, the policy elements that this particular administration just really doesn't have an appetite for.
The market cares about this stuff a lot, even if maybe less lately. We've seen investors taking this very much in stride with an S&P 500 that's not that far from all-time highs. Maura, is the president smarter than all of us to know that voters didn't have July 9th circled on the calendar? Nobody's paying attention to any of the minutia behind any of this tariff news, and that this is good politics to be seen or to be caught in the act?
Well, like I mentioned, with the issue with the Epstein thing, and you saw some MAGA fallout, at a certain point, if he continues to rewrite history and say, well, I didn't say that, and you play the tapes, people need to figure out for themselves. Can they continue to believe him? Do they stand with him? He's talked about these short-term pains for long-term gains. How long do they hold on? With these tariffs, that's a tax, and largely it's a tax on the American consumer. And so it will be a question for those strongholds, those loyalists, to decide how much longer they can hold on to someone who really hasn't shown up for them in the ways that affects them financially. I have one other comment I have to make, because when we were just talking about that Trump says something where he goes into the 38th parallel and believes that's a North Korea deal, it makes me think of The Office, where Michael Scott screams out, "I declare bankruptcy," and thinks that's it. I am constantly reminded, unfortunately, of our president and Michael Scott being very similar in some ways.
Top that.
Yeah. Now I'm just thinking of a bunch of Office references, Maura, but I want to talk about an office you used to work in, the office, as you mentioned, of the Speaker of the House, as we consider policy still ahead, knowing the president also has promised to reduce the size of the federal government and reduce government spending. Rescissions are required formally in order to do that for money previously appropriated by Congress. Do you see a clear path for rescissions, at least the package currently under consideration, to pass the United States Senate?
It's going to be tough. I mean, if we didn't learn anything from this past, debacle as far as the One Big Beautiful Bill and how hard it was to get some of these senators to agree to the cuts that they didn't want to make, and to agree to not having as many cuts as they wanted to make, this is going to hurt them even more so. I think that was child's play in comparison with what's coming, just because the cuts that need to be made in terms of our federal debt and our national debt, they're not coming from the place that Congress is currently looking at. Realistically speaking, they need to come from the Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, funds. They're not going to. Congress wouldn't touch that because, to be honest, the lobbying that's done in Capitol Hill for those programs is astronomical. But I still think that where they end up finding the cuts is going to be very painful. And without the assurance from the White House to come back to their districts, to come back to their communities, to explain to their constituents with them why this needs to be done, it's going to be tough on those who are up for re-election and up for a tight re-election.
We're going to be talking with Senator Bill Cassidy in a moment, who's up with a gig worker benefits bill. Is this the kind of approach we need to see? Maybe you don't want to specifically weigh in on that legislation, but finding more creative ways to cover people in the presence of cuts to Medicaid.
I think it's something that we should welcome, separating oneself from whether or not you even agree with it. But at least it's something that a Republican senator is putting on the table that seems to be relatively well thought out and is actually for something. Because right now their entire posture is one of kind of scalpel/chainsaw. So anytime someone, I think, comes forward in good faith with something that, at least on its face, is well-intentioned and well thought out, that all of us should welcome that, because clearly that's been an element of the workforce that's been elusive to get our arms around in terms of benefits and giving some kind of framework so that these folks can plan for the future.
Great conversation with Roger Fisk and Maura Gillespie. We thank you both, with apologies to Michael Scott. We see you scranton. Coming up, Homeland Security.